How's it going? All right. Question. Have either of you ever gotten hurt? Yes? Yes? You've been hurt? All right, so what happens when you get hurt? What do? You cry. Yeah, totally. It hurts. It hurts a lot. Like, what kind of hurt have you been? Have you gotten, like, a scraped knee?
I got a bruise.
You got a bruise from that? Yeah. Have either of you broken anything?
My dad has.
Your dad has?
Yeah, he broke his shoulder bone.
Broke his shoulder bone? Well, what happens when people get hurt like that? When they get a big hurt like that? Where do they go? What do they do?
They go to the hospital.
They go to the hospital. And they go to places where they get help, right? Do people do it all on their own? No. They go and they get help, right? So when we are really hurting, when things aren't going okay, when either physically or maybe even in our heart or maybe even in our head, when things aren't going okay, it's really, really okay to go reach out for help. That's why these places are there, right? Hospitals, doctors, nurses, parents, guardians, friends, right? All of those people are there to help you when you're not feeling well, when you're hurt. So in our story today that we're going to hear about Jesus, there's someone who is really, really hurting, and the whole community around that person goes to get help for him. Because sometimes we're hurting so much that we can't even go for ourselves. But because there are people around who love us and who are a part of it, they get help for us. So what I want you to hear from this today is, it is not wrong to ask for help. It's not a bad thing. When you're not feeling good, go for help. And if someone comes to you and offers help when you're not feeling okay, it's really okay to accept it. You can let them take care of you. And if you can practice that now and learn how to do that now, it'll be a lot easier when you're older to accept that help. So when people want to help you, it's okay to let them. All right? Ready to pray? Here we go. Loving God, thank you for loving us. Help us to help others. Help us to accept help. We know that you want healing for us and for everyone. Thank you. Amen. All right. Did I hear other little feet? Nope. Okay. So today, Mr. Kyler called and his family is having an emergency. So he's getting some help for his family. But I wasn't able to find anyone to come play downstairs because it was an emergency kind of a thing. So I would like to encourage you to stay up here and hang out with us. Would that be okay? You can go downstairs if you want to go downstairs, but you have to keep an adult with you. Okay? And so maybe there's another adult other than mom in here who might want to play with you, but I can't make promises. All right? And I'm very, very sorry I wasn't able to find someone to come step in and help us while Mr. Kyler is getting help. But we're glad you're here. All righty? All right. Have a fun day.
Mommy, I want to go downstairs.
The Holy Gospel according to St. Luke, the 7th chapter. After Jesus had finished all his sayings in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum. A centurion there had a slave whom he highly valued and who was ill and close to death. When the centurion heard about Jesus, he sent some Jewish elders to him, asking him to come and heal his slave. When they came to Jesus, they appealed to him earnestly, saying, "He is worthy of having you do this for him, for he loves our people, and it is he who built our synagogue for us." And Jesus went with them. But when he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends to say to him, "Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Therefore I did not presume to come to you. But only speak the word, and let my servant be healed. For I also am a man set under authority, with soldiers under me. And I say to one, 'Go,' and he goes, and to another, 'Come,' and he comes, and to my slave, 'Do this,' and the slave does it." When Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him. And turning to the crowd that followed him, he said, I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith. When those who had been sent returned to the house, they found the slave in good health. This is the gospel, the good news of our Lord. Thanks be to God. Please be seated. I have to say that the reading of the Galatians was fantastic, and Paul in Galatians is on a bit of a rip. Not that he often isn't on a bit of a rip. But I'm not going to be preaching on his, I don't want to call it a temper tantrum in Galatians, but if you spend some time with Galatians this week, understand that Paul has a short fuse sometimes, and he gets pretty irate, and I think that if we all ended up having our irate emails created as scripture, we might not love them being published from time to time, but there it is. Welcome to the letter of Galatians. We'll be reading that for the next 5 weeks, by the way. This week, I want to focus on our Gospel of Luke, and it's an opportunity to share some with you of what I have been researching in the last 4 to 6 months. And so that's why I'm here, looking a little scholarly with my little spread. Maybe, at least I feel that way. I don't know if it comes off that way or not, but here we go. This passage, the one piece that I want to lift up before I go into the rest of the research, is to say that the section where we hear that, for I am a man set under authority with soldiers under me, and I say to one, go, and he goes. When we hear this, it's not about power over people. That's not what this is referencing. What this is referencing is that promise and that faith and that belief. That there comes a person with authority, with the right to make things happen. And the centurion is expressing his faith in Jesus' ability to have authority over illness and authority over life and death by equating it with what he knows, right? Like, you are a person under authority. I have the authority over these people, and they do what I say. I'm asking you to heal, because I know that you have the authority over life and death. So just say the word, and he will be healed. And that astonishing faith that the centurion had, to not even question whether or not Jesus could make that change, is exactly what our scripture says. It's astonishing. Healing is a huge part of what Jesus does in the gospel. In the research that I did last semester, for those of you who don't know, I'm working on my doctorate of ministry. So this is my second semester's research ended up being all about the healing acts of Jesus in the Gospels. The healing in the book of Acts with Peter and Paul's works, the healing in the early church, and then the shift away from a belief in what one researcher calls extraterrestrial healing, which doesn't mean like alien healing, but means healing that comes from away from ourselves, outside of our planet, outside of our understanding. And North American culture, we've kind of stepped away from believing in the miracle of healing. And then my conclusion we'll get to in a few minutes. Can you guess how much of the verses of our Gospels have to do with healing? It's a lot. It's a strong percentage. 20% of the verses of our Gospels purely tell about healing. That's not parables, that's not stories, that's not talking about money. I mean, Jesus talks about money more than anything else, but when it comes to the amount of verses that tell about the healings that Jesus does, it's 20% of the verses. If you want the numbers, it's even in a citation on the paper, right? So it's, and can you guess how many healings there are? Do you think it's like 10, or do you think it's like a couple dozen?
More than 3.
More than 3, safe guess. If you're on Price is Right, you're getting there.
70 times 7.
70 times 7? No, that's a good one, though. That's a good guess. So different sources say different things, but a scholar named Wilkinson says a total of 38 accounts of healing by Jesus are recorded in the gospel. 38. 26 of these are concerned with individual healings. 12 with healings of groups. The point of this is to say, healing is really, really, really important to Jesus. The work that Jesus did on this earth, one of the intrinsic pieces of the work was to heal people. So what is the difference between healing and a cure? Because I think that that's also relevant. Healing isn't perfect. Is imperfect. It can heal different, but still be healed.
Healing is a process.
Healing is a process.
It takes time.
Takes time.
Healing is as much psychological as physical.
Healing can be as much psychological as it is physical.
Well, a cure is something that makes somebody heal, but it's a physical thing usually.
A cure is something that makes someone heal, but is a physical thing.
Yeah. Healing itself does not imply the existence of any malady.
Or absence, true absence.
Yeah.
So healing doesn't imply an absence of malady, right? Or that there is no longer something wrong with you. A cure means that you no longer have that thing with you, but healing, you may still have that thing with you.
Say something.
So get all the whole family in there. So in my paper, of course, I use a common injury that I get to see, which is a tibia fibula crack, right? Which means that around the ankle area, that the bones around that area get snapped and broken and twisted at various different levels. Now, where in the world would I see that on a regular basis? Roller derby. Right? So it's a very common injury to see people with a tib-fib fracture. And they are cured with titanium plates and rods, and everybody shares cool x-rays, and everybody's excited that someone else is in the mega cool zone with this giant. I mean, we should not be making injury be so cool, right? But x-rays are cool, especially when there's titanium rods. So tib-fib fractures, right? It gets cured with the titanium rod and some screws, some physical therapy, long-term work, hard work, right? But how do you find healing from this massive of a break?
Jesus.
Well, I think Jesus is in it, but a lot of the roller derby community wouldn't.
We're
Right?
in church.
In a survey that I did this last semester, only 20% of respondents, of 504 respondents, said that they had any kind of affiliation with faith in the roller derby community. There's more on that later. So, how do they find healing from that? By showing up, right, in community. Gonna say what?
I was going to say psychological, but kind of goes along with
Psychological, right? It's coming back and doing it again, maybe, but at least continuing to interact with the community. At least finding a way, because sometimes once you've had that large of a trauma, you're not ever going to get back on your skates, right? You're not going to be able to get back on the track. But for many, the way that they find healing post-cure is to come back to the community and keep trying it over and over and over again. And what I found is that healing versus cure can be something you find as an individual with the help of professionals. But healing is something that is most often found in community. So let's look at our gospel, because this matters, right? What happens in our gospel story today, in this healing of Jesus? And this is so typical of the healings that we find in the New Testament in our gospels. A patient is sick who needs a cure, right? But what happens to that person? That person has community and an advocate, right? And the centurion speaks to the centurion's community, who go to Jesus on behalf of this slave who is needing a cure and who is in need of healing. And Jesus, because of the actions of this community, sees this tremendous faith, and the slave is healed. Now, what happens upon that healing? The slave will enter back into relationship, will enter back into service in the world, will enter back into societal structure, right? Healing never ends with the person just being cured of their malady. If you look in the Gospels, if you look at the healings that happen, the leper is cleansed and is told to go make a sacrifice at the temple. The paralytic is dropped by his community through the thatched roof, mud and dirt and all sorts of things falling down into the room, and here comes this paralytic being lowered down in front of Jesus, and right? And here's the person, and this person didn't make the choice. It was the person's community who dropped them down through the roof. And the person is healed and stands up and takes his mat and walks out, back into restored community, back into restored life, back into restored function. It is not just about a cure that Jesus offers, it is community. My favorite quote that I found, and this is where the rubber meets the road for us, and what does this have to do with us? Probably the most important condition the church can provide for healing is this sense of loving community. By this, early Christians were known. This sense of belonging, this amazing love, gave the early church so much vitality and made it so much a healing instrument of the Spirit that it became a mark by which Christians could be told from other people. As one French scholar has commented, if Christians had not had this quality, the world would still be pagan. And the day when this quality is no longer there, the world will be pagan once again. The Pew Research states that the church in North America is shrinking. When we are loving community and a place for healing to happen, people come and they stay and they participate. When we become not a loving community, when we are not known by how we love, they find other communities to be a part of. I see it in Durban. Outcasts and sinners, the bedecked, the bejeweled, the bedazzled, the tattooed, the multicolored haired, the gender nonconformists, those with addictions, those with mental illness, When they have not found the church to be a safe place, they have found another community that is. And our call as church today is to find ways, I believe, to be this loving community. Is the centurion an insider? No. The centurion is the enemy. The Gospel of Luke is written after the sacking of Jerusalem, after the temple has been destroyed. Not only is the Roman centurion not a friend during the actual time of Jesus, but the centurion is certainly no friend when Luke is writing this gospel. And still, it's the centurion's faith that brings healing for this slave. The outsider, the outcast, the enemy, just as Luke has said right before this in the Beatitudes, the enemy can be a part of the community. That is our challenge. In a world that is absolutely struck in a binary, over and against one another all the time, our call is to claim to be loving community and to live it out for all people. So how do we do it? If healing comes through loving community, how do we be the loving community to one another? This week I'm going to give you one task to work on this. I want you to reach out to someone that you haven't seen in worship in a while. And if it's you that you haven't been in worship for a while, reach out to yourself and someone else. And if you don't know because you're a guest here, what I want you to do is reach out to someone in your community that you haven't heard from recently. Now, as an introvert, I will tell you that this is one of the most terrifying assignments ever. Right? I get that. And if there's nothing else that I have learned in 10 years of ministry and in 10 years of messing that up sometimes, when you finally make the call, very rarely are you met with anger or hurt or derision. Most often you're simply met with gratitude, even though you've blown it. So that's my challenge to you. To be loving community this week, to be an agent of healing as Jesus calls us to be through his clear actions of his time on earth. Be a community that reaches out to one another. Call, send a card, send a text, drop a Facebook message, whatever your comfort is. But do it. And watch and find out if you aren't surprised by the healing that comes.